Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode with the Crime and Coffee Couple. My name's Allison.
And my name's Mike.
Hi, Mike.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
Good. I've got a little Shorky in my lap here because there's probably some storms outside.
I don't even know that it's storming right now. I think it's raining, and she's just up and paws about it.
Yeah, up and paws for sure. So if you see on YouTube, she's just sitting on my lap, licking my hand. And that'll probably continue the entire episode. So we'll see how that goes.
She's sweet, though.
She is sweet and cute. So otherwise, if she wasn't, then she wouldn't be allowed this luxury, I would say.
So how are you doing?
Pretty good all around, just doing my thing. We're pre-recording this episode before the hurricane comes in. So at this point, if you're listening, the hurricane already came through, but we're not sure what happened. So we'll let you know.
We booked a hotel because last hurricane, Hurricane Helene, which devastated so many people, we lost power like when there was just a little bit of wind. So this time around, we're pretty sure we'll likely lose power. So we just wanted to be ahead. So we booked a hotel, which will go with our cats.
Oh, that'll be interesting.
2 cats and our dog.
As everybody knows, it's not like a 5-star hotel because I'm involved here.
Mike Pernecki is involved.
Yeah,
so.
And God knows where I don't have $250 a night to spend on a hotel. So
this man has put us in a lot of situations where we are staying at straight up dumps. One was for our 15th wedding anniversary.
Where was that?
In Charleston.
Oh, that place was bad. Yeah, that was like a trailer, I think. And
no, it was. I don't think it was a trailer. The fact that we have to have this conversation.
It was like it's set up so it was in the back of somebody's house. It was almost like, hey, we have enough room to like put up like this really bad structure, and we could probably charge people a rent because it's in Charleston. So it was like they put up the structure. It probably wasn't a trailer. And it wasn't quite like a pickup truck, or not a pickup. No, I mean like the back of a 18-wheeler, like
almost like a shipping container.
Yeah, it was almost a shipping container, I would say.
So who books something like that for their 15th wedding anniversary? I'm looking at these hotels or whatever. He's like, oh, let's do this one. The place was about 95 degrees when we got inside. We weren't quite sure if the air conditioning was working.
Yep.
Then the shower didn't work. It was like up to my calf.
Well, the shower worked.
Well, it didn't drain.
Right.
That's the problem. I was standing amongst my own filth as I was showering.
And other people's filth.
You clogged the toilet upon 5 minutes. I remember sitting on this filthy couch in the living room in 95-degree heat as Mike's taking a dump in the bathroom, thinking to myself, what are we going to do? Because we were staying for like 4 nights, even maybe 5.
Probably even thinking, what have I done with my life?
So the whole time we're out shopping and going to dinner afterwards, all I could think of is the management company getting the air conditioning working. Spoiler alert, the air conditioning did work. They did come and what they call that, snake the drain of the shower. So all turned out well.
Yeah, it was okay. The whole place was on a slant too, so when you wake up in the morning, you start going downhill into the kitchen.
You basically ran out of bed. Yeah. So we're booking a hotel in Orlando, just assuming we're likely going to lose power. I've got a girls' trip to Boston, days after the hurricane. So a lot is up in the air, and I'm a type A control freak. And when I don't have control of a situation, I kind of mentally spiral.
Yeah, and that was happening this morning and a little bit last night. And so I woke up and I was just like, all right, let's get something booked that's cancelable. And, in case this hurricane turns and we don't need it, then we can, just forget about it. But at the same time, have it just in case. And we're like in any kind of hurricane situation, you're usually running from water. And thankfully, we don't really live in a flood zone as far as we know. But yeah, just want to be kind of comfortable. And I don't have a generator because that would cost another $5,000.
Yeah, because, why would we have a generator living in Florida that gets hurricanes every single year? Why would we do that?
It doesn't make sense.
So silly.
Yeah. Now, there's a lot of people listening that might be like, well, just get a generator. It's not $5,000, but like to run the whole house, like one of those Generac things. Like, yeah, we could get one that just does the refrigerator, but this is Florida. Like, it's 90 degrees every day. You need something that runs the refrigerator and the air conditioning. And hopefully some lights and stuff like that. But we don't have any generator like that.
So I'm stress spiraling right now. And when I stress spiral, I just take control of every situation. So I've got the dishwasher going, the laundry going, I'm cleaning, I'm cooking. I'm just controlling whatever I can control and saying the mantra over and over in my head, just control the controllables. Something like that. Like, I'm basically like this close to being in a padded cell in a straitjacket.
Yeah, and I'm the kind of person that usually, like, I come into a stressful situation and I'm like, all right, there's going to be a way to solve this. Always. There's like, Allison, as you were walking away, we were booking the hotel. You're like, and what about food? What are we doing for food? And I'm like, well, there's places to get food, maybe a supermarket of some sort. Or
Yeah, but if a hurricane is coming, it, might not be
not readily accessible, but we're going to be further inland, so it will be accessible. And we'll still we have tons of, if you, let's say the doors in your house are locked down, everybody has some extra food in the house. There's some canned beefaronis and, some ramen noodles and stuff. There's just extra crap. I'm pretty sure if we needed to ration everything, we could live 2 weeks off of what we have in the house.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It wouldn't be ideal. It wouldn't be like your normal days. I've got a taste for a Greek salad today. It wouldn't be
Do we
that.
have access to pad thai with tofu and peanut sauce? That's the question.
Probably not. So you're going to have to lessen your standards a little bit and maybe a mac and cheese for 3 days and some tuna in the mac and cheese.
I would never put tuna in my mac and cheese. Not ever. In my mind, I don't eat hot tuna.
If you get hungry enough, you will do anything.
Don't give me any kind of tuna noodle casserole. Hot tuna.
Yeah, well, we'll see how it goes.
And we do have, I'm sorry, I just cut you off.
No, you're good.
So rude. We have a crap ton of Halloween candy. There's that.
Did you say a crop ton?
Crap
ton of Halloween.
ton.
Oh, yeah. And why don't you tell the listeners why we got the Halloween
Well,
candy?
I had a little PMS happening last week, and I was just jonesing for some chocolates.
Yeah.
You were running to the store. I'm like, well, while you're out there, why don't you just grab some Halloween candy?
Yeah, so I did. We got a nice little smattering. Your favorite's what, Twix?
I love Twix and I love Kit Kat and Snickers.
Oh, Kit Kat. Yeah, that's what I meant.
Well, we do have Kit Kat. We just
yeah.
don't have Twix.
I looked for Kit Kat. I always forgot Twix, even though I just said it in my head. It's subconscious that I know you like Twix.
So good. And then I made some pumpkin s'mores cookies. So those are available. So it's I'm trying to, treat my body well, eat well. I turn to the right. Boom. There's pumpkin s'mores under a glass dome just looking at me in the face. Then I turn to the left and there's a bowl of Halloween candy.
A cute little bowl. It looks like a pumpkin bowl. Yeah. No, it's really stupid. I think every year in October, I'm like, this sucks. My dentist, I'm making my dentist money right now. Basically just having sugar sitting in my teeth all the time.
Well, then just brush your teeth.
Well, I do twice a day with some really high-end stuff. And I floss. I floss, folks, every single day. I challenge some of you guys to see if anybody here flosses every single day.
I'm so bad about flossing.
Including the one to my right over here.
I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I suck about being diligent and flossing. So, we can't be perfect at everything.
Not everything.
So I'm spiraling over here and I have probably plaque in my teeth. So there's that.
You're on your...
Yeah, we're not going to talk about that.
Well, we did talk about PMS. So
yeah. So we know what comes after PMS.
We do.
All right. So on that note, are you ready to get started?
I'm ready.
Pole vaulting over that line of inappropriateness
Why is that
and making
inappropriate?
our listeners uncomfortable.
It is a scientific thing that happens. Why is that inappropriate? Why can't we talk about those
because
things?
I don't know. It's just,
Why is it you can't say the word period? Why is that so taboo? Okay. I just hit the taboo button.
You always hit the taboo button.
Yeah.
All right. So let's jump right into this. This is the murder of Greg Witman. And this is a listener suggestion from Jacey. So thank you so much, Jacey. So if you ask a parent what they hope for their child's future, they'll most likely say for them to be happy. We love, nurture, and guide our children as they grow, and gradually, as they get older, we slowly allow them more and more independence and truly just hope that we're doing the best that we can to instill the values that allow them to turn into productive, kind, and content adults who are thriving in this world. That's all we can do is just try our best and hope for the best. So in this story, the lives of what appear to be just simply a typical American suburban family come crashing to the ground in an instant. For Ron and Sue Witman, everything they envisioned for their teenage son's futures came to a sudden and tragic end on what started as a typical Fall Friday. So the Witman family consisted of parents Ron and Sue and their two sons, 15-year-old Zach and 13-year-old Greg, who lived in the small, quiet town of New Freedom, Pennsylvania. The town was shocked and saddened when they learned the tragic news that 13-year-old Greg had been ambushed in his own home only moments after walking through the front door as he came home from school. Even more chilling, they soon learned that the murderer was Greg's own teenage brother.
Oh, no.
Who slashed him to the point of near decapitation.
Jeez.
So during the filming of Investigation Discovery's 2020 documentary based on this case, it's called The Witmans, Ron Witman described their family of four as just normal American middle-class family. And after Ron and Sue got married, Sue, for whatever reason, medically, she wasn't sure that she was even going to be able to have children. So when her boys were born, she was thrilled. And despite the fact that, they're raised by the same parents in the same household, they're brothers, Sue indicated that Zach and Greg's likes and dislikes were very different. And she also appreciated those differences very much. It's what made them their own individual. So Zach was more on the quiet, introverted. She called him an instigator. So he was quiet while Greg was social and full of fun. So in the documentary, The Witmans, which I did watch, there were so many home movies that they would show. And, they're little boys on their tricycles, and she's showing Zach, who's 2 years older than Greg, repeatedly bumping his brother's tricycle. And she's like, okay, Zach, that's enough now. So he always liked to push buttons.
Interesting. It's interesting when you have the opportunity to describe your kids and one of the first words is instigator. Mm-hmm. It's just like, that's not like super sweet or anything,
Right. So Friday, October 2nd, 1998 began as a vibrant fall day, and the children of New Freedom were buzzing with excitement for the homecoming football game that night. It was Spirit Week at school, and there was a pep rally held at the school, and the students were really just getting amped up for the big game that night. So all was calm and typical until 3:17 p.m. when a 911 call came through, and 15-year-old Zach Witman requested emergency assistance to his home in New Freedom, Pennsylvania. The boy was frantic as he screamed, "I came downstairs and the door was cracked and he was just lying there." So he went on to tell the dispatcher that his brother's throat was all cut up, and he said, "I guess he's dead." So as Zach spoke with the dispatcher, 13-year-old Greg Witman's body lay slumped against the dryer in the laundry room. The dispatcher instructed Zach to move his brother to his back because they basically were instructing him to start CPR life-saving measures until the paramedics arrived. So he did what he was told, and when he did, he indicated that his brother's head practically came off, is what he told the dispatcher. So he began to scream, "Gone, gone, gone, gone. Why? So EMT and fire personnel were the first to arrive to the home, and by 3:25 p.m., police were on the scene, so very quickly because the call was placed at 3:17. So they found Zach screaming in the garage. So as this horrifying scene unfolded, Sue was, blissfully unaware of the chaos that was happening at her home. She was working at a bank in Baltimore, about 38 miles or 61 kilometers from home.
Right. Everything at this point to her is completely normal. Everything's going as it does every single day.
There was one red flag to Sue that it was just routine that when the boys came home from school, they would call her at around 3:20 p.m. just to check in. Okay, we're home. All is well. So she sees the clock. It's now 3:40, and she realizes that she hadn't heard from them. That was the only thing that was out of the ordinary thus far for her. So meanwhile, as the EMTs arrived at the Witman home, they noticed that despite the fact that Zach seemed hysterical, I say this in so many cases, they did not notice any tears coming out of his eyes. So as they entered the home, they found Greg lying on the laundry room floor. So I guess the way that it worked was you come through the garage door into the house, and immediately to the left is the laundry room. So just upon entering the home, they can see that Greg is lying on the floor in the laundry room, and he is surrounded by blood. And they were absolutely horrified when they noted the extensive damage to the 13-year-old's neck. As the EMTs touched Greg's face with his gloved hand, he could feel that the boy was still warm to the touch because everything did happen so fast. Greg would have just come home from school, like at 3:10-ish.
Yeah.
So, this...
Like 20 minutes later.
Yes. So Sean Siggins was the first officer to arrive at the scene, and an EMT quickly informed him that he had a crime scene on his hands. Siggins noted that Zach was standing in the garage with the EMT. He was holding a phone, and he seemed very, what he called, I think, excited and edgy, very jittery. So there was blood on both the phone and Zach's shirt. It was a sweatshirt that he was wearing. Zach explained that Greg's blood transferred to his body and clothing when he tried to move him to give him CPR. So as Siggins approached Zach, he continued to say that he needed to get a hold of his mom. So he told the officer that he'd left a key hanging on the inside of the storm door so that his 13-year-old brother, Greg, could get inside, and he went upstairs to take a nap. He heard then what sounded like the front door opening and then closing, and then sounds of what sounded like a struggle, and then followed by a thud. It sounded as if someone was getting thrown against a wall. And he went downstairs to investigate what these sounds were. And this is when he saw blood on the hallway at the bottom of the staircase by the foyer at the front door. And then he ultimately found his brother in the laundry room. And then he proceeded to call 911. That's what he's saying went down. So when Chief James Childs arrived at the scene, it was 3:30 p.m. and he met Officer Siggins on the driveway. He instructed him to conduct a canvass of the neighborhood. And as Childs stood in the doorway that led from the garage to the home, he could see Greg's body on the laundry room floor, again lying in a pool of blood. As Chief Childs approached Zach, he was hysterical. He was screeching in a high-pitched voice, continuing to say that he needed to call his mom. So he was told by the EMT, who, the house at this point in time had yet to be looked through. They didn't know as it potential that there could be a murderer still inside the home somewhere hiding. So Chief Childs conducted a full security sweep of the home, and in the process, he saw droplets of blood on the floor, as well as a broken table in the foyer, a jacket, a school backpack, and a keyring chain. He continued to move throughout the rooms of the house and found blood on the front door as well as the walls. As Childs made his way upstairs to the second floor of the home, it sounds like upstairs it was just bedrooms. All of the doors were closed other than the bathroom door, and he could see a towel lying on the floor. He eventually made his way through the remaining rooms on the second floor, and he called for backup. He headed back outside, and in the meantime, Zach is now in an ambulance that sat at the foot of the driveway. So the ambulance left the Witman house at about 3:45 p.m. in order to evaluate Zach at the hospital. We know he's got blood on him, has he been injured in any way, etc. So Childs instructed another officer to follow the ambulance in order to secure the clothing that Zach was wearing, because this was going to be evidence.
Yep.
So the Pennsylvania State Police Crime Scene Investigation Unit were called in. Zach's mother, Sue, was now notified at work. They called her from a neighbor's home.
Oh my God, can you imagine this call?
No, I cannot. And she was given the devastating news that her younger son was deceased.
Ugh.
And her older son was being transferred to the hospital. So at this point in time, she only knows that her younger son is dead. She's not even sure what's going on with Zach.
Right.
So in the meantime, investigators worked on locating Ron at the airport. He was on a business trip in Chicago, flying out at around that time. So as Ron landed in Baltimore, he was met by a security guard who delivered the unimaginable news of Greg's death, as Ron just collapsed to the ground in grief.
Oh my God. I mean, never a good time to get horrible news like this, but just like, you're just coming home, looking forward to seeing your family. And it's just like, oh, what are you like? Are you sure you got the right guy here? Like, I hope you don't. I hope this is a mistake. No. And then she can't even move.
And Ron later realized that at the exact time that he was boarding a plane in Chicago, his son was being stabbed to death.
Oh my God.
So within an hour, Sue arrived home from work, and Chief Childs met her on the driveway to express his condolences. All Sue wanted to see was her baby boy, who was now deceased. But Childs told her that that wasn't possible, since they needed to maintain the integrity of a crime scene. I mean, her home is now a crime scene. Yeah. So the state police, as well as the crime scene unit, arrived between 4:30 and 5:30. Photos were taken to the interior of the home as well as the exterior, including the open attached garage. In the meantime, the EMT took Zach's sweater and socks and wiped his hands with a towel that was also secured as evidence. So in the meantime, Detective Clancy from the district attorney's office went to the hospital to get a statement from Zach. The conversation started very light. The two spoke about soccer and sports in general.
So, how you doing? You like soccer? It's
Well,
like,
because they don't know this kid's involvement.
Right.
I mean, all
Well,
they
you're
know
trying to
is
be
they
friendly.
saw his brother's brutalized body on the laundry room floor. You know,
Right.
he's traumatized.
Yeah.
So Zach told him that he had been homesick from school that day. He stayed in his room much of the day. He was mostly in bed. He heard noises coming from downstairs and made the assumption that it was just Greg coming home from school. When the noises got to be a little stranger, he went downstairs to investigate, and then this is when he saw the blood and ultimately found his brother's body. Soon, investigators found no evidence that suggested that there had been an intruder in the home at any point that day. So when Sue arrived to the hospital, she was taken aback by the sight of what looked like officers questioning her son. And this is the point that it dawned on her that they were considering 15-year-old Zach as a suspect in this case.
I'm really curious to hear more because, like, does it just come out of left field? Like, has this guy had any like previous things with like animals or anything like that? You know,
No.
like they didn't think like, yeah, this is a possibility because he's got a mean streak in him.
Not at all. So Sue said that she looked her son in the eyes and directly said, "Did you kill Greg?" And Zach responded, "I never would have hurt Greg. I loved Greg." And from that moment on, Sue made the full decision to believe in Zach's innocence. And
Sure.
she has never faltered from that. So by 8 p.m., Ron was at the hospital because, of course, we know he's, coming back from Chicago. He was informed that Sue had been sedated, so he headed over to find Zach. And just as Sue had, Ron directly asked their son if he had anything to do with his brother's death. Just like he did with his mom, he held firm on the fact that he was innocent. And as with Sue, Ron believed his son, and it's never wavered. So being such a small town with a population of less than 4,000 in 1998, investigators were not well versed at dealing with a violent murder like this.
Yeah, which is a good thing because, that means there's a lot of these things happening, but luckily
Right.
it doesn't.
So there was no county forensics team at the time, and Rick Lee, who was a York Daily Record court reporter, indicated that so many people had trampled in and out of the house throughout the investigation. Reports indicate that up to 25 people had entered the home before it had been sealed off as a crime scene. So their inexperience was fully evident when they were utilizing luminol for the very first time ever in their careers.
Oh, no.
Referring to the directions as they mixed the product. And I watched
Well, that's
this.
okay. I mean, you should read it if you don't know, right? That's why the directions are there.
They're like, okay, so we got to mix blah, blah, blah cups with blah, blah, blah.
There's got to be a first time for everybody.
Right.
I mean, and at least they're reading the directions and not just like, well, I'm sure we'll figure this out. Like, they got to get it right the first time.
Exactly. So when they did manage to successfully mix and spray the solution, they did note glowing footprints in the home, but the photos taken did not process because they had the shutter speed of the camera set incorrectly. So Chief Childs did indicate that despite the lack of the photos, there was enough investigators in the room that could witness with their own eyes that the luminol did light up.
Okay.
So about 12 hours after they arrived at the crime scene, the luminol located various trails of blood in and outside the home, I should say. So the trails led to various locations, such as a computer hutch in the family room, as well as a tree in the backyard that sat next to the gazebo that covered the hot tub. So it was near this very spot, and it was not far outside of the back door of the home. I don't know, maybe 20 feet, something like that. So there's the gazebo as you exit the back door, and then there's a tree to the right of it. And they noticed under the tree there was a fresh mound of dirt, and they began to investigate it. They dug at this location and located a small bloody penknife and soccer goalie gloves. So the knife had a plastic handle with a 1 3/4 inch retractable blade.
That is tiny.
Tiny.
I mean, what, 1 and 3? I mean, like a tiny pocket knife.
Right. So Ron and Sue later indicated that they had never seen the knife before, but police did end up finding a similar knife in Zach's room during the investigation.
Okay.
But teenagers have things that, we might not know about.
Sure.
So do I believe that Ron and Sue were lying when they said that? No, I don't.
Maybe they just can't recall.
Right. So investigators spoke with the Witmans about their findings on Sunday, October 4th. This is 2 days after Greg was murdered. And the couple was furious that they were suggesting that Zach was the murderer. It was their belief that because they solely focused on Zach as being Greg's killer, that they failed to pursue other possibilities. And I hear that in a lot of cases that it's almost like tunnel vision.
Yeah, and they would just want to get their guy and be done with it.
Right. So Greg's funeral was packed with mourners. Many were fellow 8th grade classmates. It did not take long for the many residents of New Freedom to fully believe that it was Zach that was responsible for the murder. They referenced the fact that only 2 weeks before Greg's death, Greg told a friend that he was afraid of his brother because of his drug use and indicated that Greg had threatened to tell the police about Zach's drug use.
What kind of drugs are we talking about?
So they didn't say, and according to Sue, Zach had been tested for every drug under the sun and each and every one came back as negative. Ron pointed out the fact that their son had amazing grades, like upper 90% in most of his classes, which is not usually consistent with a drug problem. So there was never truly any proof to say that Zach was on drugs.
The drugs that get out of your system quickly are like the bad ones, like cocaine and heroin, stuff like that. That gets out of your system. Like you have to basically catch somebody doing it within the same day.
Yeah, I have no idea how long they stay in your system.
And then why would Greg say he was afraid of the, a 13-year-old, any kind of drug that could be like, oh, that's not,
sure,
I'm scared.
Of course.
And maybe pills, I don't know. It's
that in the 1998. I don't know that pills were really a thing.
Yeah.
I'm not well-versed on drugs.
Greg could see him smoke weed once and be like, oh, I'm worried about his drug use.
I was that way.
Yeah,
I mean, my brother smoked pot, and I was just Miss Goody Two-Shoes.
You thought it was like, multiple forms of meth and heroin at the same time.
It was like the devil's lettuce.
Because that's where we grew up, dare to keep kids off drugs.
Yes.
So that was that whole thing. They're like, any drug is terrible, stay away. So, and that interesting. So they didn't name any drugs.
They never named a single drug. So Dr. Sarah Funk was the pathologist who conducted Greg's autopsy and discovered that before his throat had been slashed to his spine, which severed his trachea as well as all but one major blood vessel in his neck. Based on the 25 defensive wounds to his hands, some were very deep, it was clear that Greg had absolutely fought for his life in the minutes before he was slashed to death. Only a small amount of inhaled blood was found in his lungs, which suggests that he died very quickly. His throat had been slashed 17 times, and he had been stabbed an additional 65 times around the neck.
All with this 2-inch knife?
Yeah, 1 3/4 knife. Right. Yeah. So according to Dr. Funk, by the time that the last swipe was delivered, Greg was already dead. Dr. Funk clipped Greg's fingernails, but interestingly enough, the DNA was never tested in these clippings.
Oh, God.
I don't get it.
Probably because they're not used to it.
I don't, maybe. So less than 1 week after Greg's death, Zach was arrested and charged with first-degree murder.
Wow.
He was charged as an adult with the risk of facing the death penalty.
And deserved if that's the case.
So Zach took part in multiple psychiatric assessments, and forensic psychiatrist Dr. Jeffrey Janofsky found no evidence to suggest that Zach had entitlement, rage, issues with authority figures, or struggles with impulse control. None of that. So the question was, would Zach respond to treatment within the juvenile system to reduce the risk of crime as an adult? Because that's what they're looking at when a 15-year-old, could this kid be rehabilitated and released back into the public safely? But Judge Euler determined that Zach should not be decertified to juvenile court and should be tried as an adult. So that was the plan. So during the filming of The Witmans, viewers saw that Ron and Sue kept Greg's room as it was when he died for years and years and years, decades even.
Yeah.
So they held up his white soccer jersey from his closet and indicated that this was the shirt that he had worn on the day he died. And despite the fact that the majority of the jersey was fully white, other than the numbers and like little emblems, police believed that Greg was wearing a red shirt when they responded to the scene. That is just how bloody and vicious the scene was.
Oh, wow.
He was completely saturated in his own blood.
Ugh.
Ron indicated that since their younger son's murder and their older son's subsequent arrest, his relationship with Sue had been destroyed, since they both had various ways of coping. And this led to many arguments within the relationship. And rather than living now as husband and wife, they cohabitated like roommates at this point. So they stayed together more in like a friendship roommate type of situation as the years went by, but not living as husband and wife.
Yeah, that happens in a lot of traumatic situations.
So after Zach's arrest, he was granted bail. He was fitted with an electronic monitor and placed under house arrest, where he stayed for 4.5 years as he awaited his trial. So he was only allowed to leave the house for visits to his doctors or lawyers. And during this time at home, Ron indicated that the community did not want him there. You know, they were fearful of his presence and what he could be capable of, believing that he had slashed his 13-year-old brother to near decapitation.
Yeah, the whole town's assuming he's a murderer.
Right. So Sue indicated that throughout this time, they lived with their son day in and day out and never once showed signs of anger, violence, outbursts, nothing.
That sucks so bad. It's like, and like this is like this kid's like prime of his life. 15 to 19, he's like sitting in house arrest on bail. Like that's so hard. I don't feel terrible if he's the actual murderer, but I don't know, you know.
And I feel for
not,
the parents.
Oh, absolutely. They both, you know, want to believe. There's one side where you really want to believe that he didn't do it, so he gave them the opportunity not to believe it by saying, "I would never do that to my brother."
Right.
So they're both
lie.
like, "Okay, well, he didn't do it. I'm going to stick with him," because they need to feel that. You know, they need to feel that their son couldn't kill their other son.
How would you want to believe that your kid would be capable of killing their sibling?
Yeah.
So childhood friends who came and supported Zach, they stayed by his side throughout this process. They would visit him at the house, and they said he basically kind of withered away and became a shell of himself throughout the 4.5 years he was under house arrest.
Sure.
He was extremely withdrawn. He was pale, sick in appearance, almost like he was suffering from a disease. The teacher who homeschooled Zach throughout these 5 years, this is Bernadette Schulte, she described him as a very bright kid. She said he was extremely kind and gentle. And like Sue, she never once saw a hint of any kind of anger. She also added that during one teaching session, Greg was so gentle that he didn't even have the heart to kill the spider that was inside the house as she was teaching him. So the trial was continuously delayed, mostly due to issues with the evidence. The sweatpants that Zach was wearing at the time of Greg's murder, they were lost, never to be found. The trial ended up beginning on May 7th, 2003.
Real quick. So the sweatpants Zach was wearing were probably the ones that went to the hospital when he was transported.
Yeah.
And even though the chief was like, "Hey, make sure you get all that evidence," they're like, "Yeah, whoops, missed it."
So we know they took the sweatshirt. It was like a blue rugby or lacrosse sweatshirt, and they swapped his hands with a towel. But and the socks. They had the socks, but not the sweatpants. So the trial began on May 7th, 2003. This is close to 5 years after Greg was murdered. Dave McLaughlin served as Zach's defense attorney. Because there was so much media attention in this case, jurors ended up being bussed 3 hours each day to and from Montgomery County. If found guilty, Zach would be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole due to the horrific nature of this crime.
Sure.
So during the trial, Zach sat like a statue, completely emotionless and stared straight ahead. He strikes me as the type that in general is not very emotional, kind of flat affect in the things that I saw.
Yeah, it's it kind of like seems like some kind of neurodivergence is going on here. You know, something going on.
Yeah, obviously we're not psychologists or psychiatrists. So the jurors learned that on the day of Greg's murder, Friday, October 2nd, 1998, since Zach stayed home sick from school that day, he went downstairs. He had left a key in the doorway so that Greg could let himself in when he got off the bus, get into the house. And he would have gotten off the bus right around 3 p.m. It was clear that whatever happened very, very quickly, as Zach placed the 911 call in as little as 11 to 12 minutes of when Greg would have walked through the door from school. So it was theorized that as Greg walked through the front door, Zach likely came upon him in the hallway where the scuffle began. And when I say in the hallway, it's the hallway that is immediately inside the front door. So this is where the blood was initially seen, and then the trail of blood led further into the house. So Zach started stabbing Greg. This is all what's being suggested. So he starts stabbing Greg in the back of the head. And because he was still wearing his backpack, only just walking through the front door, none of the wounds were seen below the collar line because his backpack would have been there to protect him. So a table was found broken in the foyer of the home, and Greg's backpack was discarded on the ground right next to it with a pool of blood surrounding the area. So based on blood evidence, investigators believe that Greg jumped up as he threw his backpack off. He ran back toward the front door he had just come in from. And the reason they believe this is because his bloodied handprint was on the wall just to the right of the front door. And you could tell then he had tried to grab the doorknob because blood from his left hand was on the doorknob. So he was unable to flee from the house because Zach was right behind him. So because he couldn't go out through the front door, he turned to his right, ran towards where the dining room was. So as Greg ran toward the dining room, he would have had to have jumped over a dog gate in order to get to the direction of the laundry room. And the reason he would have been running in this direction was to get through his second possible exit to safety. This was the garage door. Investigators found a bloodied glove handprint on the door to the garage that showed that Zach held his hand there to prevent Greg from escaping. Greg's last hope was now the door that sat within the laundry room that would have led to the backyard. And he did reach this door because there was a bloody handprint on the doorknob, but his brutalized body fell to this spot and he died.
Poor buddy.
So it was routine that a little girl named Erin called Greg each and every day when he came home from school right around 3:10 p.m.
Really?
Who does this remind you of?
My brother, when he used to call you.
Mike's younger brother had a crush on me when we were in high school, and he would call me at like 3 p.m. on the dot every day, even if I wasn't going to be there. He said, well, then you'd see that I called. It would be on the caller ID. He was like 12.
Yeah.
So this little girl would call every day, just about 3:10 p.m. So when she called, it was 3:09 p.m. Someone did pick up the phone. They hung it back up without saying a word. According to Erin, she was sure that this call was answered on the downstairs phone based on the noise that it makes when the phone hangs up. So she called a second time at 3:15 p.m., and this time Zach answered, and he told her that Greg was not yet home and instructed her to call back in a little while.
Even though Greg was home.
Yeah, he would have been home. Yes, he was already being probably dead at this point. So Erin believed that based on the sound, Zach answered this time on the phone upstairs. So during the trial...
She's good.
Yeah, I know, right? She's like a little Nancy Drew.
Yeah.
So during the trial, Erin testified that she had spoken with Zach for as many as a couple of minutes when she called at 3:15. That was the second time that she called and he actually picked up. So she said he sounded the way that he always did. He wasn't winded. He didn't seem frantic. He didn't seem stressed. Based on the time of the call, it would have been smack dab in the middle of the attack or immediately after. So the defense argued that after such a horrendously vicious attack, would it have been possible for him to sound normal?
Yeah, like at least huffing and puffing. Like at least like whatever. Like you would think some kind of stress, right?
So the whole idea is the prosecution is suggesting that Zach attacked his brother sometime between 3:10 and 3:17 p.m. So like I say, this is smack dab in the middle of it. We know that everything happened super quickly based on the time Greg got off the bus and the 911 call. The whole scene suggested that Greg walked through the door, started getting stabbed in the back, ran toward the laundry room, and this is where he slashed. So a chase is happening at this point, and vicious slashing and stabbing is happening. Could Zach have recovered to the point to answer a phone sounding completely normal?
Yeah, if he needed to, maybe. It depends. It's a lot of variables.
So investigators theorized that after Greg was dead, Zach left the laundry room. He walked through the den and out the back door. Once in the yard, he dug a hole next to the wooden porch and buried the gloves and knife. He came back inside, he grabbed the portable phone and went into the garage to dial 911 at exactly 3:17 p.m. He told the dispatcher that he did not hear a bang, but heard what sounded like suffering or wrestling around. During the trial,
suffering or wrestling?
yeah,
That's
he heard
words.
the sounds of suffering.
Okay.
So during the trial, the jury saw the blue lacrosse sweatshirt that Zach wore on the day of Greg's murder. It showed multiple different types of patterns of blood and blood staining, as well as drips of blood on the top of his socks. The sweatshirt was bloodied, but not blood-soaked. The bottoms of his socks showed blood staining as well as dirt that was consistent to the ground where the evidence was buried. So the soil was found on the white towel that his hands were wiped with. That was consistent with the mica in the yard where the evidence was found.
What's mica?
Mica is like dirt, soil, etc. So the sweatshirt showed arterial spurts, which is consistent with the wounds present to the arteries that were severed in Greg's neck.
Which would only squirt for a short amount of time.
Yes. So there was also impact spatter, which would only be there as a result of Zach stabbing his brother.
Okay.
However, there was no blood found on Zach's face or his hair, which would be expected if he was standing there brutalizing and stabbing his brother.
Couldn't he wiped it off?
No, there was no sign of a towel that he would have used.
Okay.
So the defense argued that, the fact that he didn't have any blood on his face or hair proved that he wasn't the killer. So one shallow cut was found on Zach's left ring finger. Some believe that more cuts would be expected because of the size of the knife that he was using.
Yeah.
Because obviously if he was attacking his brother, there was so much blood involved that the tiny knife he was holding would have been very slippery and would have cut him more. But only one small cut was found.
And also defensive wounds.
Right. But again, he's wearing a sweatshirt. So
or not defensive. It wouldn't be defensive on him, but fighting,
right.
from his
and
brother.
we did see that, Greg did.
Fought.
He did fight. So the defense pointed that there was no blood transfer on the outside door to the backyard where Zach would have come back through after burying the evidence and before calling 911. The sink traps in the home showed no sign of blood, so it showed that Zach did not go and wash his hands or any other blood evidence. However, if Zach wore gloves during the attack, this is my own thoughts, he's wearing these soccer goalie gloves, that, okay, he takes them off to bury them. Now his hands are blood free. So then there wouldn't be blood on the outside door coming back into the house.
Couldn't they grab some DNA from inside the gloves and see who the last person was to wear them?
They were his gloves.
Okay.
So the defense also said that the pattern of blood found on Zach's socks did not match the pattern seen on the floor when the luminol was utilized. The other big issue with the luminol was the fact that other substances caused luminol to react during the chemicals used in the hot tub that sat just outside the back door. So the hot tub chemicals will result in the luminol glowing. So that's a problem, because how can you determine what's blood and what's hot tub chemicals?
Right.
So the footprints should have gotten lighter as they progressed from the house, but they only got brighter. And Sue routinely used the hot tub. She was in that thing most every night. Yeah. So it was very, active with chemicals. Mm-hmm. So the Witmans' initial defense attorney became very ill as it started to progress toward trial. So they ended up choosing the defense attorney, Dave McLaughlin, which they later reflected was a huge mistake as he never called in any experts to argue.
That sucks because this is your one chance, to get your son off or whatever. And what horrible timing to be getting very ill.
Right. So he never called in a single expert. Reports indicate that he also allowed in incriminating evidence and failed to convince the jury that Zach would not have killed his brother. Really never, to show that he has no previous history of violence. How do you suddenly now slice your brother to the point of decapitation?
I mean, it happens, unfortunately.
And the fact that the weapon itself was so tiny, could it have caused such damage? So Sue theorized that after Greg got off the bus, he came in through the front door, and according to the state, his throat was immediately slashed many times as he stood just inside. She believes that in this initial attack, his trachea was severed, which would have made it impossible for him to scream out to his brother for help. The attacker took him through the dining room, and she pointed out that because he would have already been slashed at this point, how could he have jumped over the dog gate without knocking it? So, that's one of the things. She thinks he was like carried over it by his attacker. So he was then brought into the laundry room where Zach ultimately found him. And when the dispatcher instructed him to pick Greg up, he lifted his brother, which could have caused his head to fall back. And then the blood was transferred to the sweatshirt. But the problem is that
Zach have said any of this stuff? Sorry.
Well, he did say
Okay.
that when he was moving his brother to tried to perform CPR, that's when the blood got on him. He did say that. But the problem is that it was argued that there were different types of blood on his shirt, like arterial or splatter, that would not have resulted in the transfer of just moving his body. So Zach told the dispatcher that he could see inside of his brother's throat, yet he was still instructed to pick him up and move him. So that's why Sue is saying that's the blood on a sweatshirt. So on May 21st, 2003, the jury of 12 went on to deliberate for 12 hours. Wow. So I will ask you what I always ask you. Mike, what do you think they came back with?
This is one of these crappy scenarios where I don't think the evidence is there to prove him, but at the same time, who else could it be? It's like, it depends if the jury's like, it can't be anybody else because it was such a small window of time. There was nobody else there, no witnesses to anybody, any crazed murderer running around the place.
No.
The freaking knife was buried in your own backyard because you're a dumbass kid, pardon my French. But I don't know, guilty. He's got to be guilty.
So Zach was found guilty of first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Oof.
So in 2013, it's 10 years after his sentencing, Sue indicated, this is all happening on the documentary The Witmans, that, people question, why do you still live in the house where such a horrific thing happened? Yeah. And she said that she hopes that if there's a retrial, jury members can come to the house to see what is suggested that Zach did in the suggested time period of the attack, and they would see that it's just not possible. So Sue and Ron travel the 280 miles or 450 kilometers round trip each and every week, to visit their son at the state prison. They indicate that during their visits, he never ever speaks of the case since it's too painful. During his time behind bars, Zach became a tutor and a teacher's aide. In an adult basic education class, he helped fellow prisoners obtain their GEDs or with legal documentation. Time in the classroom inspired Zach to take college classes through Ohio University's correctional education program. So during the documentary, The Witmans, Ron was standing there talking to the camera. He was drinking from a cup of coffee, lined with the images of his sons from a recent family vacation they took only 6 weeks before Greg was murdered. And he spoke about how much fun that they had on that trip together. The kids were riding around on bikes together. At one point, Greg got lost, so Zach went out to find his brother. And Ron pointed out if Zach wanted Greg to die, he could have done something then. And he and Sue are making it their mission to help their son, who is still alive, and they continue to fully stand behind him and believe that their son's killer is still out on the loose. That is their full belief. So Ron and Sue are aware that most people believe that they either just don't want to believe that their son is capable of killing his own brother. Yep. Because they don't want to lose their other son.
Right.
They know that people think that they can't see reality or that they're just plain and simple wackos. So in March of 2013, a press conference was held with friends and family who teamed up with detectives to relaunch the investigation in order to prove Zach's innocence. An anonymous donor provided a $100,000 reward for information that could lead to finding the real killer. 4 years after the press conference, a caller from the tip line came in and provided a lead, and the Witmans went on to hire a private investigator to follow up on this potential suspect. So private detective Jeff Stein looked into the information, and learned that the anonymous witness gave a statement about a person of interest who had made concerning comments in the weeks before Greg's murder. So this person stopped over at the witness's house after he noticed his kid's bike out there, and he realized that his kid was there at the house hanging out with his friends. So as they were chatting, he complained about how much he hated the smart-ass rich kids. And he made, according to this witness, a lot of really weird statements that if somebody was standing in my house saying these things, I'd be like, okay, you need to leave.
Yeah.
So he made some statements that someone could kill them and no one would know. Like, that's weird.
Right. That's also very concerning. And
Very
in addition
concerning.
to weird, it's like, we should do something about this. Clearly something's wrong with this kid.
So say Billy's over at the house playing with our son Pete, and this guy, Joe, comes over. I mean, he's standing in our foyer saying, someone should kill them. No one would know. Grab them when they weren't expecting it.
So the rich kids are the Witmans, or
That's what this anonymous caller is alluding to.
like could be possibly.
yes.
So this is something you would report, and also something that would come to mind when they're actively investigating something. Why did it take so long for this dipshit to come out and be like, oh, here 20 years later, whatever the hell it is.
So she does go on to defend why she didn't come back and say it sooner. So the woman indicated that the man lived within walking distance of the Witman's home, and during his time at her house, on top of these weird, like crazy concerning things he's saying to her, he then takes out a pocket knife and begins to clean his fingernails with the knife. The tool he used looked eerily similar to the penknife that killed Greg.
Yeah, because there's those like Swiss Army knives that have all those different extensions. One of them is for cleaning out your nails.
I mean, to me, it's a little strange to stand in someone's house and whip out a knife and start cleaning the dirt under your fingernails.
Sure.
That's just me. Right. It's not what I tend to do.
Right.
So he told her that he had another tool like this at the home, and it was so sharp it could cut your throat in a second. So the woman learned of Greg's murder, and she asked her husband what she should do with this information. And he said, well, really, it's the police's job to find the killer, and if he's guilty, they'll find him. But soon the man moved away, and they never found this guy. So in 2016, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that sentencing juveniles to die in prison is cruel, unusual, and unconstitutional.
Yeah.
So with this, the Witmans hope to get a reduced sentence, but in order to do so, Zach would have to admit guilt for the DA to negotiate.
Ugh, that sucks.
So Sue felt that this was going to be a big problem because she remained convinced that Zach did not kill Greg, and he would basically have to lie and say that he did in order to get a reduced sentence.
It's crazy.
So Zach agreed to plead guilty to a reduced sentence to a charge of third-degree murder. Until this point, he maintained his innocence. The plea hearing was held on February 8th, 2018 and the state parole board granted him parole on January 18th, 2019 with the earliest release date of May 21st, 2019. So the same month, February of 2018, 20 years had passed since Greg's murder when the Witmans moved out of their home, and at this point in time, they relocated to a more remote area of Pennsylvania. During Zach's January of 2018 guilty plea hearing, a transcript of his confession, was read aloud. It indicated that on October 2nd, 1998, Zach was homesick from school. During the day, Greg's girlfriend called and Zach hung up on her. When Greg came home, he was angry about this and confronted his brother, which in turn angered Zach. Zach went to his room and Greg followed, looking. So he's saying that his brother followed him into the room, continuing to press, why would you hang up on her? Yada, yada.
Brother stuff.
Right. So Zach intended only to scare his brother, and he grabbed gloves and a knife. He then followed Greg downstairs, and things escalated, and he began stabbing him in the foyer of the home. Greg ran to the laundry room to escape, which is exactly what the evidence indicated happened, and Zach ran after him and slashed and stabbed him to death. And after, he called 911 and he went into the yard to bury the evidence. So according to Chief Deputy Prosecutor Tim Barker, at the time of the murder, Zach was too afraid to admit what he had done. According to Barker, prosecutors offered a plea to his attorney in 2002, but Zach was never told about it until late 2017. So this fact allowed his first-degree murder conviction to be void, which allowed him to plead guilty to third-degree murder. So at 9 a.m. on Tuesday, May 21st, 2019, Zach was released from prison, 16 years to the day of his conviction at age 36. So Sue indicated that Zach was furious that they had participated in this documentary, The Witmans, because he did not want any more attention directed at him. Sue chose to do so because she wanted viewers to realize that there are two sides to every story.
Yep.
She wanted the world to know that they're decent people, their children are and were decent people, and what happened to their unassuming family could truly happen to anyone. She's like, we were a normal family. We never in our wildest dreams expected this to happen. You know, this could happen to anybody. So since his release, Zach went on to earn an associate's degree in paralegal studies. He graduated with honors in December of 2021. He's gone on to work with organizations that advocate for comprehensive changes to the criminal justice system. He plans to focus on studying legal philosophy. And private investigator Jeff Stein is continuing to independently pursue this potential other suspect. And that is the murder of Greg Witman.
Man, that's crazy. Because you can't go to sleep and know for sure what happened. But at the same time, Zach said that he did it and explained it. Did they have to come up with that story together? Was there any background to that? Did the parents be like, here's what you got to say? Because this is what the evidence says.
Because we all know what the evidence said. It was all presented in trial.
Okay.
The blood painted the picture. The timeline painted the picture of exactly what happened to Greg. It was such a tight timeline. And like I said, you could see the blood all over the foyer floor. You could see that that's where he discarded his backpack and his jacket. The table in the foyer was broken right there. He turned and ran to the front door to leave. You could see his handprint one way and the other. And then the blood trails show that he turned and ran through the dining room to try to escape the garage door. That didn't happen. They saw the gloved hand preventing him from doing so. He turned immediately to the right to escape through the laundry room. You could see his blood hand on the doorknob in that room.
Yeah.
And then he ultimately succumbed to his injuries and the continued attack.
Right. I know all that. But so just knowing all this, maybe I'm slow, but do you just think Zach definitely did it?
Well, the reason why I think that was the case is because there was absolutely no other evidence to suggest that there was a third party here, that there was any person lurking around the neighborhood, that there was any sign of a break-in, any evidence to suggest that somebody else had been inside that house.
It's the whole Occam's razor. It's the easiest solution is the right one.
Right.
And Zach, if you heard a big struggle and suffering, wouldn't you go check it out and see who it was? Zach, for his own part, didn't see anything else any other person that he could point to, you would go down and check it out or something.
And he did go down and check it out. But what's suggested by his mom is that the person who did this had already fled the scene, that he had killed her 13-year-old son in a frenzy and then left.
I mean, I'm definitely interested about this dude that lived a few doors down.
Right. But then I wonder, is this woman now just coming forward because of the money involved? That could lead, I don't know.
Getting stories. Yeah, it's so crazy.
I know. It's just, to me, it's the timeline that's so tight that makes it so, because we know Zach was upstairs sleeping. So this person would have come into the house and been in there when Greg came home from school.
Yeah. And if you've listened to us before, you know that I've suggested that I should be the person that decides if people should get the death penalty in the United States or not. And I wouldn't have given this kid, Zach, the death penalty. I would, and also probably not even life. He seems like he could be rehabilitated, just that kind of feeling perhaps. Mm-hmm. And especially just nothing in the past. You'd hate for him to go on and do something again, but this might just be, it's so hard to say one way or the other. I kind of get where his parents are coming from. It's a horrible, horrible situation. And you almost let them make the decision, kind of. That you can't put the law into their hands, but
you can't. Obviously, we're always going to choose for our loved ones.
Of course, yeah.
So the other thing that gets me is the phone call that little girl Erin made. She called at 3:09. The phone was picked up and hung up. It's not like a murderer was going to pick the phone up and hang it back up. They would just allow it to ring. There's no way a hiding murderer in the home would have picked up that phone. She believes, based on the sound that it made, that phone was answered downstairs where the attack would have been happening, right in the midst of what it was happening. Then the second time around, Zach answered it on the upstairs phone, according to the sound. Is that scientifically true? No, she was guessing that. But both times, in the midst of when it was theorized he was attacked, that phone was answered. The only person that would have answered it is Zach, which means he was right there in the midst of this frenzied attack.
Yeah.
My belief is that, yes, Zach did this.
Yeah.
Obviously, everybody says he never showed signs of previous outbursts or anger or violence. Does somebody just snap like that?
Yeah, all the time, unfortunately. And that's the other thing. Like, you can look into like the maps of your neighborhood and see where the pedophiles are and stuff. And it's like, okay, well, there's none in my neighborhood. It's like, that doesn't actually mean there's no pedophiles in your neighborhood. That's nobody that's been caught.
Right.
There's a first time for everybody, for everything. So it's possible anyway, which is, I don't mean to cause a stir or anything.
I don't know. It's just like you think in your head, okay, this is a 15-year-old kid that's got straight A's. He's never shown signs of violence. He plays soccer. Like, how does your brother walk through the door from school on some random fall day saying, why the heck did you hang up on my girlfriend? And it escalates to the point of such a violent murder. How does that happen?
I don't know. It's sad.
It's so sad. And truly, my heart does break for the Witmans. And the fact that sweet 13-year-old Greg lost his life is just, it's beyond. The situation just sucks all around.
It does. Well, thanks for sharing his story. And thank you for listening, everybody out there. And if you like what you hear, go ahead and leave us a 5-star review on any platform you listen to us on. Or if you're feeling especially generous, go ahead and become a patron or an Apple subscriber. There's a free 3-day trial on Apple, so go ahead and give that a shot. Or just like and subscribe to any of our YouTube and Instagram. That helps us too. So
a 5-star review on, Apple would be wonderful too.
Like I mentioned about
did you say that
8 seconds ago?
Apparently I wasn't listening. I'm so sorry.
I don't listen to you most of the time, so it's good.
That is true. I was talking to you about what was for dinner, and then like 5 minutes later, you're like, "So what's for dinner?" I'm like, "I just told you."
It's like, yeah, I'm just kind of programmed to be like, yeah. And you're like, "Does this sound good?" And like, honestly, I like everything, so it's always like, yeah, it sounds good. I was doing something for work, so yeah. My bad.
Anyway, thank you guys so much for being here. And until next time, bye.